The Wolf Empress's throne had room for one, so she pulled the janitor onto her lap. This station was not just a hub for travelers and traders. It was the heart of an interstellar empire ruled by the Wolf Empress. Her throne sat in the center of the palace, a structure that was part crystal, part living metal, growing and shifting as though it were alive. To the inhabitants of the galaxy, the Empress was both feared and admired. Her intelligence, her decisions, and her grace were legendary. Few dared question her, and those who did often learned humility in surprising ways. Yet despite all her power and all the worlds under her rule, the Empress was alone. Loneliness was a quiet companion in her grand palace. Diplomats and nobles came and went, but their conversations were full of ambition and flattery, never genuine warmth. The corridors of her palace were filled with life, yet she often walked them feeling as though she were surrounded by shadows. Only the station itself, humming softly with its artificial intelligence and the gentle flow of life support systems, offered her steady company. On one ordinary day, as sunlight, or its artificial imitation, fell through the crystalline windows of the palace, she noticed someone new moving quietly through the corridors. Eli, a human janitor, was small and unassuming. His uniform was simple, slightly worn, and he carried his tools in a neat leather bag. He moved with quiet efficiency, cleaning without fuss, noticing things that others overlooked. A spill of coolant, a faint streak of dust, a door that did not close properly, all caught his attention. The Empress paused in her walk, hidden behind a curved archway of living metal, and watched. There was something calming about the human. Unlike the diplomats who tried to impress her with loud voices and clever words, Eli did not care for attention. He did not look at her with fear or awe. He only focused on the task before him. Curiosity took hold. The Empress followed him at a distance, observing him as he moved through hallways and chambers. She noticed how he greeted the small maintenance drones, how he spoke quietly to the station's AI, and how his eyes, bright with human curiosity, seemed to understand things even the AI did not. He was ordinary, yet somehow extraordinary in his simplicity. A sudden noise drew both of them to a grand hall. Eli had accidentally knocked over a tray of tools, and they clattered across the polished floor. He froze, expecting reprimand, but none came. The Empress stepped forward, her presence filling the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. She looked down at him with an expression that made Eli's heart skip a beat. There was no anger, no authority demanding obedience, only amusement. "Careful," she said, her voice soft but commanding, "or you might make this palace your playground." Eli blinked, uncertain how to respond. I'm sorry, Your Highness, I didn't mean to," the Empress laughed, a rich musical sound that echoed across the hall. "Relax, human. One spilled tray does not change the course of the stars." She crouched slightly, her wolf-like eyes glimmering with interest. "Tell me, do humans always worry so much about mistakes?" Eli hesitated, then smiled nervously. "We try not to, ma'am, but we also notice things." The Empress tilted her head. "Notice things? Yes, little things others miss, they can be important." The Empress's lips curved into a rare smile. For a moment she simply watched him, studying the way he spoke, the way he carried himself, the calm honesty in his eyes. She realized that this human, though ordinary by galactic standards, had something many of her advisors lacked: attentiveness, humility, and a perspective unclouded by ambition. "I think," she said after a pause, "you might be more useful to me than you realize." Eli's jaw dropped. "Me? Useful? I'm just a janitor." "Exactly," she said, her smile widening. "Precisely because you are just a janitor, you see the world as it truly is. Nobles, diplomats, even generals, they are always playing games. You human are free from such pretenses." From that day on, the Empress found excuses to see Eli. She called him to her throne room under the guise of inspecting the palace. Each time, she asked him questions about his life, about Earth, about humans. Eli shared stories of his childhood, of cities filled with noise and laughter, of forests untouched by machinery, of small acts of courage that often went unnoticed. The Empress listened, fascinated. She asked about human creativity, their curiosity, and their ability to adapt. Eli answered honestly, never trying to impress, never pretending to know more than he did. For the Empress, this was a rare pleasure. She had spoken with scholars, strategists, and diplomats from across the galaxy, but few could match the simplicity and insight of a human who had never sought power or recognition. One afternoon, as the sunlight shifted through the palace's crystalline windows, the Empress gestured toward her throne. "Come closer," she said. Eli hesitated. The throne was a place no one approached casually. Its surface glimmered, alive with energy, and the Empress herself radiated authority. I shouldn't," he murmured. "Should or shouldn't mean little here," she replied, her tone playful yet firm. "Sit with me." For once, let the rules of the court bend to curiosity, not protocol. Eli swallowed and stepped forward. The Empress extended her hand. "Here, sit, there is room." He knelt, then awkwardly perched beside her. She laughed softly and, without warning, pulled him gently onto her lap. Shock and embarrassment flashed across his face, but the Empress held him securely. There was no threat in her gesture, only trust. The room was silent, yet the act was loud in meaning. It was a statement that greatness could be found in unexpected places, and that even a humble janitor could share a moment of connection with a ruler. The advisors who peeked into the throne room whispered among themselves. What was the Empress doing? They had never seen her behave this way, but the Empress paid them no mind. She looked down at Eli, her expression softening. "You see the world differently," she said. "You notice what others ignore. That is a rare gift, human." "Do you understand how valuable that is?" Eli shook his head, still bewildered. I think so, ma'am. I do my job. I don't know if it's valuable." "The smallest details can change the fate of empires," she said. "And sometimes the simplest mind can see what the most brilliant overlook." For the first time in his life, Eli felt that he was seen, not as a janitor, not as a human in a palace of aliens, but as an individual with thoughts and insights that mattered. The Empress, in turn, felt a spark of joy she had not known for centuries. Here was a creature unbound by the rules of her court, untainted by politics or ambition, capable of reminding her that the galaxy was more than strategy and ceremony. Their conversation stretched long into the artificial evening. They spoke of stars, of planets, of life beyond imagination. Eli told stories of Earth's rivers and mountains, of humans building and creating, of friendships that endured hardships. The Empress shared tales of distant worlds, of civilizations she had guided, and of decisions that weighed heavily upon her. And as they spoke, a subtle bond formed. The Empress realized that perhaps the loneliness she had felt for centuries could be softened, even healed, by understanding and companionship. Eli discovered that even in the vast, alien world of the Wolf Empress, a human could matter. When the evening drew to a close, Eli carefully stepped down from her lap. "Thank you, Your Highness," he said quietly, unsure if he had done anything worthy of gratitude. "Thank me?" she asked, smiling. "No. Thank yourself for reminding me that even rulers need reminders of the simple truths. You, human, have done more for me today than any advisor ever could." Eli nodded, still stunned, and returned to his duties. But from that day forward, he was no longer just a janitor. He was a quiet observer, a companion to the Empress, and a reminder that the smallest, simplest beings could carry a universe of wisdom in their hearts. The palace continued to hum with life, the stars outside glimmered, and the Empress walked the halls, her mind alive with new thoughts. She had seen what humans could offer, and she would not forget it. In the vastness of the galaxy, greatness often hid in plain sight, and sometimes it came in the form of someone as humble as a janitor named Eli. The first part of their story had begun, not with politics or war or power, but with curiosity, laughter, and the quiet acknowledgement that even the smallest beings could leave a mark on the cosmos. Days passed in the space station, but for the Empress and Eli, nothing was ordinary anymore. What had started as curiosity had grown into a quiet routine. The Empress would find ways to involve Eli in small palace matters, not as a servant, but as an observer, a companion who offered fresh eyes on the vast world she ruled. She discovered that he saw details others ignored. A misplaced piece of alien machinery, a sign of stress in a visiting diplomat, a flaw in a ceremonial design that would otherwise go unnoticed. Eli, on the other hand, was learning more about life beyond his cleaning duties. He saw the station from heights he never imagined, walked through corridors that were part garden, part machine, and spoke to beings whose shapes, colors, and habits were unlike anything he had known on Earth. And through it all, the Empress watched him with quiet delight. She was fascinated by how calmly he navigated the strange and often intimidating environment, how he approached problems not with pride or fear, but with curiosity and careful thought. One morning, the Empress summoned him again. "Eli," she said as he approached, "come with me. There is something I want to show you." He followed, his steps careful, mindful of his surroundings. They walked through the throne room, past corridors that gleamed like liquid metal, and into a chamber filled with holographic maps of distant star systems. The Empress gestured toward the maps. "These are the territories under my care," she explained. "Every planet, every colony, every star system matters, and yet even I cannot see all the details at once." Eli looked at the projections, amazed at the complexity. Stars blinked like scattered gems, and the lines connecting them shifted constantly, showing trade routes, patrol paths, and communications networks. "It's huge," he said. "I mean, I never thought one person could manage all of this." The Empress smiled. "It is not about management alone. Leadership is about understanding people, understanding systems, and seeing connections others miss. That is why I value your perspective. You notice things others overlook." Eli blushed slightly. I just notice things because I pay attention. I never thought it was important." "Ah, but that is the human strength," she said. "You do not need to prove your importance. You act naturally, and yet your perspective becomes invaluable." They spent the day moving through the palace together. The Empress asked questions about human life, about courage and friendship, about how people dealt with challenges without the powers or technology she had at her command. Eli answered honestly, with no pretense. He told her about teamwork in simple communities, about small inventions that made life easier, and about moments of kindness that often went unnoticed but built bonds between people. By the time evening came, they had returned to the throne room. The Empress reclined slightly, a gesture of comfort, and gestured to the space beside her. "Sit," she said. "Tell me more about Earth's skies." Eli hesitated. He had sat on her throne before, but today the gesture felt different, more personal, more significant. He stepped closer and sat down, unsure how to feel. The Empress leaned back, resting one hand gently on his shoulder. "Do you know," she said softly, "why I called you here today? Not to work, not to serve, but simply to talk?" Eli shook his head. I'm not sure." "Because humans have something the galaxy often underestimates," she said. "Your hearts are not bound by tradition, nor are your minds clouded by ego. You see things as they are. You notice what others ignore. You remind me that even in a world of immense power, small truths matter." Eli felt a warmth in his chest. No one had ever spoken to him like this. No one had ever made him feel that his simple ways of thinking could be meaningful. I don't know what to say," he murmured. "Then say nothing," the Empress replied. "Sometimes presence is more powerful than words. Sit with me, be here, that is enough." For hours, they talked about trivial things and important things. They watched the stars through the palace windows, discussing the ways they moved and the stories humans attached to them. Eli told her about constellations and myths, about humans who dreamed beyond the limits of their world. The Empress shared her own experiences, revealing rare insights into diplomacy, leadership, and the weight of responsibility. And then, unexpectedly, the conversation shifted to the station itself. A minor issue had been reported in one of the observation decks. Rather than call an engineer, the Empress turned to Eli. "Would you help me inspect it?" Eli blinked. But I'm just—" "Not just anything," she interrupted gently. "You notice what others do not. I want your eyes on this." They moved to the observation deck, where a small error in the lighting system had caused a flickering that no one else had noticed. Eli knelt, examined the panels, and suggested a simple adjustment that corrected the problem instantly. The Empress observed, pleased by his natural problem-solving skills. She had seen countless engineers with impressive credentials fail at similar tasks because they overcomplicated things or ignored the subtle details. "You see," she said, smiling, "your mind works differently. And that is why I trust it." Eli felt a sense of pride, but it was quiet and steady, not boastful. He realized that being human, being simple and observant, gave him a kind of power no one else had in this palace of grandeur. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them grew. The Empress began to include him in more matters, small and large. He accompanied her to meetings, not as a participant, but as a silent observer. His presence reminded the council members that wisdom could be quiet, that insight did not always come with a title or loud voice. Diplomats and nobles were puzzled by this arrangement, but the Empress ignored their whispers. She had found something rare in Eli: perspective, honesty, and the quiet courage to be himself in a world that expected performance. One day, a group of alien scholars visited the station, bringing complex mathematical problems related to trade routes and planetary alignments. The Empress allowed Eli to observe them as they worked, then asked him for his thoughts. To the astonishment of everyone, he suggested an alternative approach, a simple, intuitive solution that made the scholars reconsider their calculations. They tried it and it worked perfectly. The room was silent for a moment, then filled with murmurs of surprise and respect. Eli, still humble, simply nodded. He had not sought praise, only tried to understand the problem. The Empress watched him with quiet satisfaction. "Humans have a gift," she told him later. "You see patterns where others see chaos. You understand connections instinctively. That is why the galaxy needs humans, even if it does not yet know it." Eli laughed softly. "I never thought I'd be considered important, Your Highness." "I'm just me." "Exactly," she replied. "Being yourself is your strength. You do not have to be grand, powerful, or famous. You simply are, and that is enough to change things." In private moments, the Empress would sometimes pull him onto her lap, not as a joke or whim, but as a gesture of trust and equality. In that small act, she conveyed a message no council meeting could. That greatness was not in titles, but in recognition of potential and character. Eli, sitting there, felt a sense of belonging he had never known, and the Empress found joy in teaching him that the galaxy was not only about power, but about understanding, kindness, and insight. Their days were filled with small adventures and lessons. Eli learned about alien plants that could communicate through light patterns, about the station's AI systems that managed millions of tasks simultaneously, and about the subtleties of interstellar etiquette. The Empress learned to appreciate simplicity, humor, and perspective from a being who had no ambition beyond doing his best and understanding the world around him. One evening, as the artificial sun of the station set in golden light, the Empress and Eli stood on a balcony overlooking the city-like structures below. The wind, artificial but pleasant, rippled the robes of her ceremonial dress. She looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "You have taught me something invaluable, human," she said. "That even the smallest voice can guide the strongest ruler. That observing quietly, thinking honestly, and acting with care can change the course of events more than armies or strategies ever could." Eli smiled. I just try to see things as they are. I never thought it mattered to someone like you." "Matters?" she asked, her tone gentle. "Everything you do matters, your eyes, your thoughts, your heart. They are reminders that even in a vast galaxy, humanity has a place. And not just a place of service, but a place of value." Eli felt a quiet pride, not from recognition, but from understanding. He had found a world where his presence, simple and honest, was not only noticed but appreciated. And the Empress, in turn, had found someone who reminded her that the most profound lessons often came from those who expected nothing in return. As the stars began to twinkle beyond the balcony, the Empress placed a hand lightly on Eli's shoulder. "Tomorrow we will meet with the council. They may not understand your role yet, but they will learn. And perhaps together we will show them that the galaxy is bigger, more complex, and more beautiful when humans are part of it." Eli nodded. He did not yet know what the future held, but he understood one thing clearly. Being himself, noticing the small details, and thinking honestly could make a difference. And in a galaxy so full of power, intrigue, and expectation, that difference was priceless. For the first time in his life, Eli realized that being a human, simple, observant, and curious was not a limitation. It was a gift. And sitting beside the Wolf Empress, learning from her and sharing in her world, he understood that sometimes greatness begins in the quietest, most unexpected ways. Weeks turned into months, and life in the space station grew into a rhythm that neither the Empress nor Eli had expected. The palace, once a place of strict order and ceremony, now hummed with quiet understanding. The Empress continued her work, overseeing vast territories, meeting with diplomats, and making decisions that affected countless worlds. Yet her perspective had shifted. She now walked with Eli by her side, sometimes silently, sometimes in conversation, sharing insights that no advisor had ever offered. One morning, an urgent message arrived from the neighboring planetary system of Zyra. Their leaders had questioned the Empress's alliances with humanity. They feared that humans, simple, unpredictable, and unfamiliar, could disrupt the delicate balance of interstellar relations. Their message was firm, demanding a demonstration of authority, or they would reconsider their loyalty to the coalition. The Empress read the message carefully. She understood the weight of the situation. A misstep could escalate tensions across multiple star systems. Her advisors immediately suggested a show of strength, troops, fleets, and displays of technological superiority, yet the Empress shook her head. "No," she said, looking at Eli. "This cannot be solved by force, not this time." Eli blinked. "Then what do we do?" "We think differently," she replied. "We rely on your strength, your human strength." The council was baffled when the Empress proposed a new plan. Instead of deploying fleets or issuing stern warnings, she would invite representatives from Zyra to the station. There they would meet a human who had quietly influenced decisions and demonstrated insight, wisdom, and honesty. The idea was unconventional, perhaps even risky, but the Empress had faith in Eli. Preparations began immediately. The station's halls were polished, gardens arranged to show life and harmony, and guest chambers prepared with careful thought. Eli, though nervous, assisted quietly, noticing small details that the Empress's team overlooked. He adjusted the arrangement of seating to allow open conversation, pointed out inconsistencies in the schedule, and suggested ways to make the alien visitors feel respected without bowing to fear. The day of the diplomatic meeting arrived. Eli stood beside the Empress as the Zyra delegates entered the throne room. Their appearance was imposing, with tall, sleek forms, vibrant skin tones, and intricate patterns that marked their status. Their expressions were unreadable, their posture formal and rigid. The Empress, seated on her throne, gestured for Eli to join her. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, placing himself beside her, not behind, not below, but as an equal in presence. The delegates exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the human's presence. They expected advisors, generals, and ministers, not a janitor. The Empress began the meeting with a calm and authoritative voice. "Representatives of Zyra," she said, "you have questioned our alliance with humans. You have doubted their role in our coalition. Today I present one who can show you why humans deserve trust, not fear." Eli swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment. He glanced at the Empress, who gave him a reassuring nod. "You can do this," she whispered quietly. He began to speak, carefully, honestly, and without pretense. He told stories of Earth, of humans working together to solve problems, of communities that overcame challenges with creativity and persistence. He spoke of small solutions that mattered, of noticing details that could prevent disasters, and of empathy that guided decisions even in difficult situations. The delegates listened, at first with skepticism, then with growing curiosity. They had not expected such insight from a human, especially one so humble in appearance. His words were simple, yet they carried depth. He suggested approaches to trade conflicts, resource sharing, and communication that no one had considered. His ideas were intuitive, based on observation and careful thinking rather than rigid rules or titles. The Empress watched silently, proud of the human beside her. She had known his value, but seeing him articulate it to alien leaders was a revelation. Eli's presence reminded everyone that intelligence, creativity, and problem-solving did not always wear a formal title. Sometimes, they came from the quiet, unassuming mind of someone who simply noticed what others missed. One delegate leaned forward, intrigued. "You suggest we adjust trade routes based on observation?" he asked. "We have never done it this way." Eli nodded. "Yes, the patterns are there if you look carefully. We don't need more force, we need understanding. By working together, we can prevent waste, delays, and conflicts." Another delegate raised a question about communication delays between planets. Eli suggested a system based on natural cycles and observation rather than technological dominance, a method that seemed counterintuitive but proved efficient when explained with clear reasoning. Slowly, the delegates began to nod. They discussed, questioned, and debated, but always returned to his ideas, realizing their practicality. By the end of the meeting, what had begun as tension and doubt turned into agreement and even appreciation. The Zyra delegates acknowledged the value of humans in their coalition. They recognized that a simple, honest perspective could often solve problems that complexity only worsened. They had come expecting displays of power, but instead, they found clarity and solutions in the quiet wisdom of a janitor. The council members whispered among themselves, astonished. None had imagined that human insight could influence interstellar decisions so effectively. Yet the Empress had known all along. She had seen the potential in Eli, and now the galaxy could see it too. After the delegates left, the Empress turned to Eli. "Do you understand what you have done?" she asked. Eli shook his head, still in disbelief. I just spoke what I thought. I never imagined it would matter this much." "It matters because it is true," she said. "Humans have a gift for noticing what others miss, for seeing connections that others ignore. That is why the galaxy needs humans, not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as thinkers, observers, and collaborators. You have proven it today." Eli felt a quiet pride. He did not seek recognition, yet he realized that his simple perspective had changed the outcome of a potential conflict. The Empress, seated beside him, smiled with a warmth that few had ever seen in her. "You see, human," she said, "sometimes courage is not in fighting or commanding armies. Sometimes courage is in observing, thinking, and speaking honestly." The weeks following the diplomatic success were filled with small celebrations and acknowledgments. The council learned to respect Eli, not for his title, but for his insights. And yet he remained humble, continuing his duties with the same quiet diligence as always. The Empress encouraged him to participate in more advisory matters, gradually giving him a voice in decisions that affected the galaxy. Through it all, the bond between the Empress and Eli grew stronger. They shared quiet conversations in the throne room, walks through the palace gardens, and moments of reflection as they watched distant stars. Sometimes she would pull him onto her lap again, a gesture of trust and equality, reminding him that he was valued not for his position, but for his mind and heart. One evening, the Empress and Eli walked along the observation balcony. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, a tapestry of light and color. "Do you see," she asked, "why I value humans so highly?" Eli nodded. "Yes, Your Highness, I understand now. We notice things, we think differently, and we can solve problems that others overlook." "Exactly," she said, "and you have shown me that even the smallest voices can guide the strongest rulers. That is why I trust you. That is why I invited you into my world not as a servant, but as a partner in understanding." Eli smiled quietly. "I never thought my life could be like this. I never imagined this kind of trust." "Trust is not given lightly," she replied. "It is earned through honesty, attention, and courage. You have all three, human, and that is why you sit beside me, not behind me, not below me. You are a reminder that even in a galaxy filled with power and grandeur, simple truth and human insight can change everything." As they stood together, the stars twinkling beyond the balcony, Eli realized something profound. He had always thought of himself as ordinary, small, and unnoticed. Yet here he was, influencing the course of interstellar diplomacy, guiding decisions, and earning the respect of beings from worlds he had never imagined. It was not power, strength, or skill that had brought him here. It was his perspective, his attention to detail, and his honesty. The Empress placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Tomorrow, we continue our work. There will be more challenges, more decisions, more moments that require careful thought. But know this, with humans by my side, I have seen the galaxy differently, more fully, and more wisely." Eli nodded. He did not yet know what challenges lay ahead, but he understood one thing clearly. His humanity, simple and observant, could make a difference in ways he had never imagined. And in the company of the Wolf Empress, he had found not only purpose, but a place where his voice and mind truly mattered. The quiet bond between them, built on trust, curiosity, and respect, had already begun to reshape the station, the council, and the galaxy's perception of humans. And as the stars sparkled endlessly above, it was clear that this was only the beginning of a story that would change the course of many worlds. Months had passed since Eli had first been invited into the Wolf Empress's presence. The palace, once a place of strict rules and distant grandeur, had transformed into a space of quiet understanding and collaboration. Diplomats from across the galaxy now recognized the value of human insight, and the station itself thrived under a combination of the Empress's wisdom and Eli's careful observations. One morning, the Empress called Eli to her private chambers. Her expression was serene but thoughtful. "Eli," she said, "we have a matter that requires your unique perspective. The Council has proposed a new network of supply routes across several distant systems. The plans are efficient, but something feels off." Eli followed her to a large table covered with holographic projections of planets, trade lanes, and resource hubs. He studied them carefully, his brow furrowed. "I see what you mean, Your Highness," he said slowly. "The routes work in theory, but some connections are too long and others are unnecessary. They could cause delays if there is a disruption in one sector." The Empress nodded. "Exactly. You notice what others often overlook. Let us find a better solution." Together, they worked through the projections, discussing each planet's resources, population, and connections. Eli suggested adjustments that simplified the network while maintaining efficiency. He accounted for factors that the Council's plans had ignored: natural cycles, weather patterns, and even subtle political tensions between minor worlds. The Empress watched him carefully, impressed by his ability to combine observation with empathy. By the afternoon, they had designed a new network that was both simpler and more effective. The Empress called the Council to review it. One by one, the advisors and diplomats examined the revised plan, their faces reflecting surprise and admiration. The Council had expected technical expertise, calculations, and strategy, but what they found was something far more powerful: insight grounded in observation and understanding. A senior advisor spoke first. This is remarkable. The original proposal was sound, but your revisions, Eli, improve efficiency while reducing potential conflict. How did you notice these patterns? Eli smiled quietly. I just looked carefully and thought about what might happen. I tried to imagine the experience of each planet, each world, and each person who depends on these routes. The Council fell silent. It was unusual for a human, especially one without formal rank or training in galactic administration, to provide such clarity. Yet his observations were undeniable. The Empress's decision to trust him had proven wise. She sat back in her throne, watching the scene with quiet satisfaction. Eli's presence reminded her that leadership was not only about power or authority. It was about recognizing insight, creativity, and truth wherever it might appear. Later, as the Council dispersed, the Empress turned to Eli. "Do you understand what you have accomplished today?" she asked. Eli shook his head, still modest. I just tried to help, Your Highness." "You have done more than help," she said. "You have shown the Council that humans, even those who appear ordinary, possess a unique way of understanding the galaxy. You have reminded them that strength is not always in fleets or armies, but in observation, reasoning, and empathy." Eli felt a quiet warmth of pride. He had never sought recognition, yet he realized that his simple perspective had influenced decisions that would affect millions of beings. And in that moment, he understood something else. He belonged here, in this vast palace, not because of a title, but because of his humanity. In the days that followed, Eli's role continued to grow. He was consulted on logistical matters, diplomatic questions, and even cultural disputes. The Empress encouraged him to speak freely, and the Council, though initially hesitant, began to recognize the value of his input. And yet, despite all the attention and influence, Eli remained humble. He continued his duties, cleaned corridors, maintained equipment, and observed quietly, knowing that his greatest strength lay in seeing what others overlooked. One evening, as the artificial sun of the station set, casting golden light across the palace gardens, the Empress and Eli walked together along a balcony. Below, the station's inhabitants moved through their routines, unaware of the significance of the human walking beside their ruler. "You have changed the perception of humans across the galaxy," the Empress said softly. "They now see that your kind is not weak, nor simple, nor insignificant. You have shown them that observation, honesty, and thoughtfulness can guide empires more than force ever could." Eli smiled, humbled. "I never imagined I could make such a difference. I'm just me." "Exactly," she said, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Being yourself is your strength. You do not need grandeur, power, or fame. You simply need to think, observe, and act with honesty. That is enough to influence the galaxy." Later, in the quiet of the throne room, the Empress gestured for Eli to sit beside her. Without hesitation, she pulled him gently onto her lap. This had become a private ritual, a symbol of trust and equality between them. No one else needed to understand it. It was a bond formed from mutual respect, shared insight, and recognition of true worth. "You see, human," she said, her voice calm and warm, "the galaxy is vast and complicated. Yet even in its complexity, a single perspective can guide the course of events. You have shown me, and many others, that greatness often comes from those who expect nothing, but notice everything. Eli looked at her, realizing how far he had come. He had started as a janitor, unnoticed and unremarkable. Now he influenced decisions, guided diplomacy, and reshaped perceptions across star systems. And yet, he remained the same, observant, thoughtful, humble. He had not sought power. He had simply noticed, listened, and acted honestly. In the weeks that followed, the station thrived under their combined guidance. Trade routes flourished, alliances strengthened, and disputes were resolved with creativity rather than conflict. The human janitor's quiet insights became a cornerstone of the station's success, and the Empress's leadership was celebrated not only for her wisdom, but for her ability to recognize value in the simplest of beings. The council, once skeptical, now often deferred to Eli's observations, asking for his input before making decisions. They had learned that intelligence and influence were not always loud, flashy, or titled. Sometimes they came from quiet, observant minds that noticed what others missed. One afternoon, Eli found himself in the palace gardens, tending to the small greenhouse he had grown fond of. The plants were from Earth, carefully transported and nurtured, and they flourished under his care. The Empress joined him, sitting nearby on a stone bench. "You have a gift, human," she said, "not just for observation, but for nurturing, understanding, and thinking ahead. You remind me that even the smallest actions can shape the future." Eli smiled softly. "I just try to do what I can. I never imagined it would matter so much." "It matters because it is real," the Empress replied. "The galaxy often values grand gestures, but it forgets the quiet ones. You have shown that true influence comes from honesty, insight, and care. That is the legacy of humans in this world." As they watched the artificial sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows and golden light across the palace, Eli realized that his life had changed forever. He had begun as an ordinary human, unnoticed and unremarkable, yet he had become a force of understanding and insight. He had shown that being human, observant, curious, and honest was not a limitation but a strength. The Empress, in turn, had learned a lesson she had long forgotten. That wisdom is not confined to those with power or status. Sometimes it comes from the quiet, the humble, and the unexpected. And in recognizing that, she had strengthened her reign, her alliances, and the very future of the galaxy. Even in the quiet moments, when the palace hummed with life and the stars glimmered beyond the windows, the bond between them remained strong. She would sometimes pull him onto her lap, not as a whim, but as a gesture of trust, respect, and acknowledgement of the unique role he played in her world. It was a silent reminder that greatness is not always visible in titles, appearances, or rank. It often comes from the heart, the mind, and the courage to be oneself. And so the station thrived. Humans earned respect across alien civilizations, and the Wolf Empress continued to rule with wisdom, strengthened by the insights of a human who had begun as a janitor. Together, they showed the galaxy that power was not just about armies, fleets, or authority, but about seeing clearly, thinking honestly, and recognizing greatness wherever it could be found. In time, stories spread across star systems about the Empress and her human advisor, tales of a janitor whose quiet mind changed the course of empires, and of a ruler wise enough to notice him. It became a symbol, a reminder to all. Sometimes the smallest, simplest beings can leave the largest mark, and the heart of humanity can shine even in the vastest reaches of the cosmos. And in the quiet of her throne room, the Empress smiled, pulling Eli gently onto her lap once more. The galaxy outside continued its endless dance of stars and planets, but here, in this palace, two unlikely companions had discovered a simple truth. Greatness is not always in power or status, but in perspective, insight, and the courage to be oneself. The story of the Empress and the human janitor had reached its beginning, middle, and now its present. A testament to the quiet strength of humanity, the wisdom of recognition, and the enduring power of trust, curiosity, and understanding. And though the stars would continue to shine for eons, the bond between them remained a shining example of what it truly meant to see, to think, and to matter.